Good evening, everyone. Let's talk about something that's on all of our minds at some point or another, caring about what other people think of you. We've all been there, right? Worrying about whether we're saying the right thing, dressing the right way, or just constantly wondering if we measure up to the expectations others have of us. But here's the thing, this constant fear of judgment is exhausting, and it holds us back from being our true selves. So today, let's break free from this mental trap. Let's learn how to stop caring what other people think and start living for ourselves. Let's start by addressing something that's so fundamental, yet so often overlooked. People are focused on themselves. We get caught up in the idea that everyone around us is constantly watching and judging our every move. But here's the reality, most people are wrapped up in their own lives, their own thoughts, their own worries. The truth is, their focus is rarely on you. Think about it for a moment. How much mental energy do you devote to thinking about other people? Probably not a whole lot. You're busy thinking about your own goals, your own challenges, your own problems. The same goes for the people around you. They're not as concerned about your appearance, your words, or the little mistakes you might think you've made. They're focused on the same human concerns you are. How do I look? What do people think of me? Am I succeeding or failing? Does anyone notice me? What this means is that most of the time, the things we worry about in terms of others' perceptions are at best fleeting thoughts. People might notice something briefly, but it's usually not something they dwell on. When you understand this, it becomes much easier to let go of the pressure to perform in front of others or worry about their judgment. The heavy weight of being watched starts to feel much lighter when you realize that, just like you, others are mainly focused on their own lives. Another aspect of this is the fact that people are not judging you in the way you think. Often, the judgments we imagine are magnified or distorted versions of reality. You may think that people are critiquing your choices or your behavior, but in reality, they're more likely distracted by their own internal dialogue. It's empowering to realize that people aren't paying as much attention to your every move as you think they are. This shift in perspective helps free you from the constant worry of others' opinions. When you stop assuming that everyone is analyzing you, you can begin to shift your focus back to what truly matters, your own goals, your values, and your own happiness. You start living for yourself rather than seeking approval from others, who, in the end, are just as concerned with their own lives as you are. One of the most liberating realizations you can have is that you can't control others' opinions. Think about it for a moment. No matter how hard you try, you can never truly dictate what someone else thinks about you. No matter how perfect you try to present yourself, or how much effort you put into gaining approval, their opinions are shaped by a whole host of factors that are completely out of your control. Each person's perspective is influenced by their own life experiences, personal biases, cultural background, and even the way they're feeling at any given moment. What one person thinks is impressive or admirable, another might see as irrelevant or even irritating. Someone might think your choices are brave and bold, while another person might think they're reckless or foolish. These opinions aren't about you. They are simply reflections of that person's worldview, which is uniquely shaped by their own life. Now, let's really dig into this. You could spend an enormous amount of time trying to please everyone, tailoring your actions and words to match what you think others want from you. But even if you did manage to win the approval of one person, it wouldn't guarantee that the next person would think the same way. There will always be people who like you, and there will always be people who don't. And no matter how much you try to change their minds, you can't control that. This is where the freedom comes in. Once you accept that others' opinions are beyond your control, you release yourself from the need to please them. You stop wasting energy on trying to figure out what everyone wants or expects from you. You realize that it's simply impossible to be everything to everyone, and that's okay. You can't control how people perceive you, but what you can control is how you choose to perceive yourself. When you stop being held hostage by the need for others' approval, you open up the space to live authentically. The people who matter, who truly value you for who you are, will appreciate your uniqueness, and those whose opinions you can't change or don't align with you. Their thoughts no longer have the power to affect your sense of self-worth. This idea of releasing control over others' opinions is not just about protecting yourself from judgment. It's also about reclaiming your energy and your peace of mind. The more you understand that you are not responsible for changing others' views, the more empowered you become to focus on what you can control: your own actions, beliefs, and happiness. Judgment is inevitable. No matter what you do, no matter how hard you try to please everyone or be the perfect version of yourself, people will always form opinions about you. It's a natural part of human behavior, and it's something that, unfortunately, we can't escape. It doesn't matter if you're on your best behavior, acting with kindness, or doing everything by the book, someone somewhere will judge you for it. The reason this happens is because judgment is a deeply ingrained part of human psychology. Our brains are wired to assess and categorize things, and people are no exception. We form opinions about others based on our past experiences, our values, and our understanding of the world. These judgments may come from a place of comparison, insecurity, or even just projection of their own feelings and fears. So, no matter how flawless your intentions or actions may seem to you, someone might always find something to critique. What's crucial to understand is that this judgment isn't personal. It's not about you, but rather about how the other person views the world. When someone judges you, it says more about their own experiences and perceptions than it does about who you are as a person. For example, if someone criticizes your career choices, it might be because they feel threatened by their own lack of direction, or because they've been conditioned to think that success looks a certain way. That's their truth, not yours. This realization can be freeing. When you accept that judgment is an inevitable part of life, you stop trying to prevent it, which ironically gives you more freedom. You begin to understand that you cannot control what others think, and therefore it's futile to spend time worrying about it. Instead, you can focus on the only thing within your control: how you show up in the world and how you choose to live your life. Another thing to consider is that judgment often has a shelf life. People might judge you one day, but the next day they'll be onto something else. Their opinions are rarely permanent and are constantly shifting based on new information or experiences. So why spend so much time trying to avoid something that is transient and often superficial? People move on quickly, and the things that seem so important in the moment often fade into the background as time passes. Ultimately, accepting that judgment is inevitable allows you to stop fighting against it and start focusing on what truly matters: your own peace, growth, and authenticity. When you stop expecting to be free of judgment, you let go of the need to conform, and you give yourself permission to live without constantly second-guessing what others think. Embrace your imperfections. It's one of the most powerful things you can do for yourself, yet it's something many of us struggle with. We live in a world that constantly promotes perfection: perfect bodies, perfect relationships, perfect careers. Social media bombards us with images of flawless lives, and we start to believe that this is the standard we must meet. But the reality is, perfection is an illusion. We all have imperfections, and they are what make us human. The idea of perfection keeps us stuck in a cycle of self-criticism and comparison. We see the flaws in ourselves and think they disqualify us from happiness, success, or love. We might think that if we could just fix this one thing about ourselves, whether it's how we look, how we speak, or how we perform in our careers, then everything would fall into place. But perfection is not the goal. Growth is, and growth doesn't come from trying to be flawless. It comes from learning to love and accept yourself as you are, flaws and all. When you embrace your imperfections, you open the door to authenticity. Instead of pretending to be something you're not, you allow yourself to be real. You stop hiding behind a mask, and you let go of the fear of being judged for not measuring up to some external standard. When you embrace your imperfections, you're free to make mistakes, try new things, and learn without the weight of needing to be perfect hanging over you. Your imperfections are not weaknesses. They are part of your unique story. They are the experiences and the choices that have shaped who you are today. Maybe you've made mistakes, everyone has, but each one of those mistakes has given you valuable lessons that you would not have gained if you had been perfect. Each flaw you have is a part of your personal narrative that adds depth and richness to your character. Those imperfections are what make you relatable to others, and they allow you to connect in a way that perfection never could. In fact, when you embrace your imperfections, you give others permission to do the same. We live in a society where people are afraid to be vulnerable, to show their true selves for fear of judgment. But when you allow yourself to be imperfect, you give others the courage to do the same. Your authenticity is liberating, and it creates a space where everyone can feel comfortable being who they truly are without fear of rejection. The more you accept your imperfections, the less power they have over you. Instead of feeling embarrassed by your flaws, you begin to see them as part of what makes you unique and strong. You learn that it's okay to not have everything figured out. It's okay to stumble. It's okay to have a bad day. Embracing your imperfections means giving yourself the grace to be human, to fall down, pick yourself up, and continue moving forward. And in doing so, you will realize that you are enough just as you are. When you stop chasing perfection, you open yourself to the possibility of living a more fulfilling and authentic life. You stop measuring your worth based on unrealistic standards and begin to see your true value. By embracing your imperfections, you begin to see the beauty in being yourself, flaws and all. And that, my friends, is where true freedom begins. Shift your mindset from external validation to self-validation. For most of us, seeking approval from others is deeply ingrained in our daily lives. Whether it's looking for praise from a boss, waiting for likes and comments on social media, or trying to please family and friends, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that our worth is determined by what others think of us. We tie our self-esteem to their approval, believing that if others see us as valuable, then we must be valuable. But what happens when that external validation is missing or doesn't come in the form we expect? Our confidence takes a hit and we feel like we're not good enough. The truth is, external validation is fleeting and unreliable. People's opinions are constantly changing, and what one person values or appreciates about you, another might not. Even if you get the praise and acknowledgement you crave, it often doesn't last. You find yourself needing more, always chasing the next compliment or recognition. This cycle is exhausting, and it doesn't allow you to build the foundation of self-worth that you truly need. Self-validation, on the other hand, comes from within. It means recognizing your own value without needing anyone else to confirm it for you. It's about knowing that you are enough, regardless of whether anyone else sees it or not. When you validate yourself, you stop depending on others to tell you that you're worthy, successful, or capable. Instead, you start to trust your own judgment and affirm your own worth. You acknowledge your own efforts, progress, and growth, and you give yourself credit for the small victories, even when no one else does. Shifting your mindset to self-validation requires a change in how you view yourself. It means learning to appreciate your own strengths, even when they're not recognized by others. It's about celebrating your uniqueness rather than trying to fit into someone else's mold. When you start validating yourself, you start to see yourself as your own source of strength and approval. You stop seeking outside affirmation to feel secure in who you are. A powerful aspect of self-validation is self-compassion. It means treating yourself with kindness, especially when you make mistakes or face setbacks. Instead of beating yourself up or feeling like you failed because you didn't get the external validation you were hoping for, you treat yourself with understanding. You recognize that you're human and that growth is a process. When you validate yourself, you're able to lift yourself up in moments of doubt and stay resilient in the face of challenges. This kind of inner support is far more reliable and long-lasting than anything that comes from outside sources. Another key part of self-validation is trusting your instincts. When you stop looking to others for approval, you begin to trust yourself more. You stop second-guessing your decisions or feeling uncertain about your path because you believe in your own judgment. You know that you are capable of making the right choices for your life, and you learn to listen to your own inner voice. The more you trust yourself, the more you're able to stand firm in your beliefs and your actions, even when others may not understand or agree. Self-validation also leads to increased independence. When your sense of worth isn't tied to others' opinions, you free yourself from the constant need for approval. You start to make choices based on what feels right for you, not on what you think will make others like you or accept you. This independence gives you the confidence to go after what you truly want, without worrying about how others might perceive you. You realize that your happiness doesn't depend on anyone else's validation, it depends on your own. Shifting from external to self-validation also gives you greater resilience. When you rely on others for validation, their opinions have the power to shake your confidence. If they approve, you feel good. If they criticize or ignore you, you feel bad. But when you validate yourself, you don't let the opinions of others dictate your emotions. You know that your worth is not defined by anyone else's approval or disapproval. And as a result, you become more emotionally stable and less affected by outside influences. Ultimately, the more you practice self-validation, the more empowered you become. You stop living for the approval of others and start living for your own growth and happiness. You stop looking outside yourself for validation and start looking inward, where true confidence and peace reside. When you stop needing others to tell you that you're good enough, you start realizing that you've always been good enough. And that's when you can begin to truly own your worth. Reframe failure as growth. Failure is something we all encounter. Yet we often fear it more than anything else. We tend to view failure as a reflection of our inadequacy, a sign that we aren't good enough, or that we've made some irreversible mistake. But the truth is, failure is not something to be feared, it's something to be embraced. Failure is an integral part of the learning process, and when we shift our perspective, we begin to see it not as something that defines us, but as something that helps us grow. When we make a mistake or fall short of a goal, it's easy to spiral into negative self-talk. We might tell ourselves that we failed, that we're not capable, or that we're never going to get it right. This mindset only keeps us stuck. It's rooted in the belief that failure is something shameful, something to avoid at all costs. But if we reframe failure as growth, we can start to see it for what it really is: an opportunity to learn, improve, and build resilience. Every time you fail, you gain valuable insight into what doesn't work. Failure teaches us lessons that success often cannot. When you don't achieve your goal or make a mistake, you are given the chance to analyze what went wrong, understand why it didn't work, and adjust your approach moving forward. This is how we grow. It's not about avoiding failure, but about using it as a tool for progress. The people who are most successful in life are not the ones who avoid failure at all costs, but the ones who keep going despite it. They understand that failure is part of the journey, not a roadblock. In fact, many of the greatest achievements in history have come after multiple failures. Thomas Edison famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." He reframed every failure as a step closer to success. What if we all adopted that mindset? Instead of being discouraged by setbacks, we could view them as necessary steps on the path to mastery. Each failure is not a reflection of our worth, but rather a stepping stone in the process of becoming better. One of the most powerful aspects of reframing failure as growth is how it shifts our mindset toward resilience. When we stop seeing failure as something to avoid or fear, we develop the strength to bounce back faster. We begin to see setbacks not as signs that we should give up, but as temporary challenges to overcome. This perspective builds mental toughness, helping us face future obstacles with confidence. We know that if we fail, we can get back up and try again because we have done it before and we will continue to do it. Reframing failure also encourages innovation and creativity. When you stop fearing the negative consequences of failing, you become freer to experiment and try new things. Failure no longer feels like a personal attack, but an expected part of trying something new. This is when innovation happens. Think about artists, scientists, entrepreneurs, or anyone who has achieved great things. They've all encountered failure along the way, but they didn't let it stop them. They used it as a way to grow, adapt, and refine their craft. Another important benefit of reframing failure is that it shifts the focus from perfectionism to progress. Many of us strive for perfection, thinking that anything less than perfect is a failure. But perfection is unattainable, and striving for it can lead to frustration and burnout. Instead, we can focus on making consistent progress. Every time we try something, whether we succeed or not, we learn something valuable. These small, incremental improvements over time add up to growth. By embracing failure as a natural part of progress, we can free ourselves from the paralyzing need for perfection and instead embrace the journey. When we reframe failure as growth, we also cultivate self-compassion. Instead of beating ourselves up for our mistakes, we begin to treat ourselves with kindness and understanding. We recognize that no one is perfect and making mistakes is part of being human. This compassionate approach allows us to stay motivated rather than discouraged. We're kinder to ourselves when we don't get things right, and we recognize that failure doesn't mean we're not good enough. It simply means that we're learning and evolving. Lastly, reframing failure as growth encourages us to be more courageous. When we let go of the fear of failure, we become more willing to take risks. We understand that failure is not the end of the world, it's part of the process of getting better. This mindset helps us step outside our comfort zones, try new things, and take on challenges we might have once avoided out of fear. We realize that failure is not something to be feared or avoided, but something to be welcomed as a valuable teacher. In the end, failure isn't something that defines us or holds us back. It's a tool, a teacher, and a catalyst for growth. When we shift our perspective and see failure as a necessary part of the journey, we open ourselves up to a world of possibilities. We embrace challenges, learn from mistakes, and emerge stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Instead of seeing failure as an obstacle, we begin to see it as the very thing that propels us forward. In conclusion, embracing failure is growth, shifting from seeking external validation to self-validation. And learning to embrace our imperfections are all keys to unlocking a more authentic, fulfilled life. The road ahead will not always be easy, and you will face moments of self-doubt, setbacks, and criticism, but remember, these are the very things that shape and strengthen you. You are enough as you are with all your imperfections, and each challenge you face is simply another opportunity to grow stronger, wiser, and more resilient. So let go of the fear of judgment, embrace who you are, and trust that your journey is unfolding exactly as it should. You have the power to define your own worth, to see failure not as a roadblock, but as a stepping stone, and to move forward with the confidence that you are always enough. Live for yourself, honor your growth, and remember, the only opinion that truly matters is your own. Thank you.